Right off the bat, you probably clicked on this video because of the catchy clickbait title. I mean, why wouldn't you? The Star Wars prequels are just so awful, and everyone who has an inkling of intelligence hates them. To think that they can even compare with the godlike original trilogy is considered blasphemous. To call them superior on top of that, well, you just have to be in a mental institution, much like myself. However, I will say that the reality is I don't genuinely think that the prequels are objectively better than the original, so you can shut the fuck up about that already. They are two completely different series made in completely separate time periods with different context, as well as having a completely different foundation and what kind of special effects they used. The reason I'm making this video is because I'm just so sick of the constant backlash and smug hatred the prequels get, and honestly I think they are incredibly underrated on their own merits, and I want to express that. Not to mention, the original trilogy is not so mighty and perfect that everyone pretends they are, and I'm here to cast my opinion on it. Let's get some background as to my history with the Star Wars franchise first. I grew up with the prequels primarily. I was born in 1995 and have distant flashbacks of watching the original Phantom Menace as a young kid. At the time, I enjoyed it as much as any 4-year-old would, which was incredibly passive and just enjoying it because, oh wow, explosions. However, my real love for Star Wars would actually begin some 6 years later when I was about 10 years old when the Revenge of the Sith film came out. The storyline, characters, and world building that existed in this film expanded my mind into realms of imagination I still continue to draw upon to this day. I then watched the original trilogy, and yes, I did enjoy them, but my heart always remained with Revenge of the Sith. Why? Maybe because I'm an idiot drone who doesn't appreciate true golden storytelling that the magnificence of the original trilogy seems to uphold. Despite this, I grew up around older people I looked up to, who always proclaimed how much better the original trilogy was compared to the prequels, and I bought into their narrative, holding the view that the prequels were garbage, until I got older and felt much more confident in having my own opinion about things. I recently watched through the entirety of the series in canon, making sure I watched the original Star Wars edition that came out in the 70s and 80s, and not the special CGI rendered editions you may find nowadays. So now, after many years of taking a break from Star Wars, it is completely fresh in my mind and I'm ready to dig deep. Let us first discuss the main reason why I think so many people hate the prequels, and that is what I believe to be a generational gap issue. Because the older generations grew up with Star Wars mostly as children, they have a strong nostalgic remembrance about it. This is a main problem because the time The Phantom Menace came out, all these kids finally grew up, and when hearing about a new Star Wars film, had ridiculously high expectations.
Are there any of you that think this is going to be a lousy movie?
I feel like, I don't know, like it's exciting. I'm going to be going to the first show of like Phantom Menace, and I don't know, that's all I can say. Thanks.
10 loved it, 7 liked it or thought it was okay, and 2 are no longer Star Wars fans.
Fantastic.
Go see it as quick as you can.
It was better than all of them.
No matter who you are, nothing will be able to bring back that same joy and amazement that you get from being a kid watching a movie that touches your heart. It's a highly subjective experience that can't be replicated in adulthood. Top it off with the fact that Phantom Menace is not only a different era of Star Wars, it takes a completely different direction of storytelling than what is used to in the old films. This is jarring for people because they expect the same old narrative of the good guys versus the evil empire. But story-wise, this is not possible because this is supposed to be a backstory of how the evil dark times arose in the first place. Despite many people not agreeing with this aspect as being important in the universe, the amount of information relevant to how the political system of this world functions was incredibly detailed and well thought out. Not to mention highly realistic and impressive in terms of what to compare it to. You have Queen Amidala having a negotiation with a trade federation, a highly complex organization that functions as a sort of intergalactic corporate economy of this galaxy, taking this peaceful planet of Naboo hostage. And what do you have in the original trilogy? They're big bad evil space guys blowing up a planet for literally no reason. I get this is supposed to be for kids, and I see why having so much backstory to its political government structure is unnecessary, but honestly, as a kid, I found this shit to be super interesting, and it made this world much more believable to me. Not to mention the creativity of having the queen in disguise as one of her loyal handmaidens was always a big shock to me, and I found it to be a cool little side plot of detail. Now let's move on from the Phantom Menace and actually talk about the writing quality of the prequels themselves. This is a major point as to why the prequels are considered to be god-awful, because of its super cheesy and essentially lame dialogue between the characters.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Not like here. Here everything is soft and smooth.
As if the original trilogy had such sound and crisp writing.
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder.
I'll never join you!
If you only knew the power of the dark side. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No. I am your father.
It's not true. That's impossible!
Search your feelings. You know it to be true.
No!
This is an important aspect, but I think once you see the context of the writing in a greater sense, you will learn to appreciate it on another level. The original Star Wars was meant to be a cheesy blockbuster space action film. That was the premise. It was based off the old 1950 space movies and reflected the dialogue and sequences perfectly in a newer, fresh context. The prequels, however, are a completely different set of movies and should be viewed as such. The reason I think people see the prequels as inherently inferior is because they expect the tropes to be exactly the same as the original films. That being the typical hero's journey, which you can read about extensively in any beginner's script writing course or what have you. The issue is that the story archetype cannot work for the prequels because it's a setup for how Anakin Skywalker falls to the dark side. He is not a hero on a holy quest. He is a powerful warrior who is tempted into an evil path, and having a reason for his downfall is the centerpiece of this entire series, and this can only happen through drama. Drama in the form of a cheesy soap opera in outer space. Even George Lucas himself explains this as a concept.
We want to make something for the fans. So I said, all I wanted to do was tell a story of what happened. You know, it started here and it went there, and it's all about generations, and it's about, you know, the issues of fathers and sons and grandfathers, and it's a family soap opera. I mean, ultimately, space, we call it space opera, but people don't realize it's actually a soap opera. Yeah. And it's all about family problems, and it's not about spaceships.
And while many people think of it as being stupid and not practical for a movie like Star Wars, I think it is the best route he could have taken in terms of creating a believable character arc that still works on a super simplistic level, because that's what Star Wars is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be intellectually stimulating. Its inherent strength comes from its sublime simplicity.
Don't be afraid.
I'm not afraid to die. I've been dying a little bit each day since you came back into me.
What are you talking about?
I love you.
I thought that we had decided not to fall in love.
I truly, deeply love you.
When viewing the movies from this lens, as someone who does enjoy watching cheesy soap operas from time to time, the prequels actually become a lot more entertaining to watch. Mix in with amazing choreography and action sequences, it becomes a much more compelling narrative compared to the original trilogy. And yes, I will say that. Think about this for a second. You have Anakin's fall to the dark side. What's his motivation for becoming evil? That originates from his complex relationship with his mother, who he carries immense guilt over after basically leaving her as a slave to become a Jedi Knight. After 10 years, he only sees her again completely slaughtered by Sand People, leaving him bitter and angry, and most importantly, afraid for the future. His strong feelings for Padme reflect this in Revenge of the Sith, when he gets a premonition seeing her death while giving birth. Desperate to save her, he has to learn the ways of the dark side from Lord Sidious in order to potentially learn such powers. He does anything and everything to appease his new master, including killing young children, eventually becoming consumed by his own quest for power, and completely losing sight of why he chose this path in the first place. Couple that with his immense ego built up over the years of being called the Chosen One, his ability to get lost in his own delusions of grandeur is expanded further. This, to me, is solid character building, and paints a much more complex character as Anakin, despite its incredibly cheesy dialogue.
You're with him! You brought him here to kill me!
No!
Let her go, Anakin.
Anakin.
Let her go.
You turned her against me!
You have done that yourself.
And what do we get as Luke's character development? Well, right off the bat, after his aunt and uncle died, he shows zero remorse for their death, just brushes it off as if nothing happened and goes off with Obi-Wan to become a Jedi, like as if he literally didn't just see their burning corpses lying right outside his front door. This should be traumatizing for anyone. These were literally his guardians since he was born, his parents ultimately, brutally murdered by the hands of the Empire. And how does he respond?
I want to come with you to Alderaan. There's nothing for me here now. I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
Oh yeah, you're just gonna leave? Like no funeral? Yeah, peace, Mom and Dad. Nice knowing ya. I'm gonna go hang out with the samurai I met in the middle of the desert and save some princess I've never heard of before. But I'll see you around. And then towards the end of the series in Return of the Jedi, literally the most unbelievable prospect and is honestly a perfect example of horrible character development unfolds. His motivation to join the dark side comes from Lord Sidious killing all of his friends, and then miraculously, because of his anger, decides to join him as his apprentice. How this functions as a believable reason to join the dark side makes absolutely no sense. In reality, if Luke chose to kill Sidious out of his anger, how would that even be productive in a dark side perspective in any way whatsoever? This entire ending of the series is littered with character holes, which on top of it all leads to one of the most boring finale fights ever. Just Darth Vader throwing his master off the balcony. No, you don't get to see them fight. I mean, you see Luke and Darth Vader go at it for a bit, but wouldn't it be more epic to see Darth Vader finally attest to bringing balance to the Force and to have a final conclusion of strength between him and the Emperor? No, you get this. This is leading to my attestment as to why the prequels are much better than the originals, and that is from the basic tenet of lightsaber duels. The choreography is absolutely amazing, and the fight scenes are nothing short of adrenaline pumping. When you watch the originals, they're so boring and dry you find there's no reason for the fight to even exist in the first place. And this is the main reason why, as a kid, I didn't really care much for the original trilogy. The fight scenes sucked. I mean, if we're gonna get real and say that Star Wars are just for kids, guess what? Kids don't care about plot lines and character arcs that much. Maybe some kids who are weird like me, but definitely not most of them. What they want are kick-ass lightsaber duels and explosions and guns firing. And guess what? The prequels did this much better than the originals. And while on a smaller note, the soundtracks in the prequels are much more memorable than the original trilogy, you cannot deny that Duel of the Fates is the best fighting song ever composed by a man. And, as a final say, Yoda looks a lot better as a CGI-created character instead of being the reject Sesame Street animal he was in the original trilogy. Yoda even seemed wiser and more put together in the prequels compared to his manic, hermetic character type in the originals. His wisdom and aura, however, transcends the whole series, so I can't give too much critique on him. So that's about it. I thought I would just make this video for the hell of it because I felt like it. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you next time.